welcome everyone to today's edition of Frontier Opening Bell. I am Bosun Omofai. Welcome my panelists to today's show, Ali Segar in Dubai. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you very much, Hassan.
It's good to have you. And another Ali, of course, the rich man in Nairobi, the CEO and founder of Rich Frontiers. Good morning, Ali Kansacho.
Morning. Pleasure to be with you as always, Bosun.
Thank you. We appreciate your time as always here. And Joshua Debisi, we also appreciate your time. Banking analyst at Vetiva Capital Management, an investment and licensed securities trading firm.
Good morning, Bosun. Thank you.
Joshua, thank you so much. So let's see how the markets finished off on Thursday. The Nigerian market got a bit of another soft bite of 0.31%. That's from investors who seen a bit of a very strong rally over the last 2 weeks or so on the Nigerian bourse. The Ivorian market was deeper by almost 1%. The Egyptian market did a 1.62% on Wednesday. The Kenyan market lost 1%, and the South African GSE softens 0.36%. Just give you a wrap there. For the East African market, the big story across Africa had to do with the World Bank latest outlook on sub-Saharan Africa. But this is very interesting what ABSA is trying to do in Kenya, offering unsecured loans of up to 10 million shillings to SMEs. That's curious. However, Rubis Energy did 2 acquisitions and now is started operating as a major player in Kenya's petrol retailing business. And South Sudan is not giving up on his petrol refinery building. Trinity Energy is helping the country to build a $500 million refinery to position South Sudan still in the energy market. Tanzania's inflation at 3.1% year on year. Ali Khan, let's start with you. What's ABSA looking to achieve with this promising of unsecured loans to SMEs?
So I think that's a very interesting development, and it speaks to the fact that it's unsecured. We're talking about 10 million shillings, which is $100,000. They launched an online system which basically allows them to lend off the phone. They've built up a lot of intelligence and a lot of customers. I think they got something like 5 or 6 million customers on this system. So I think what they're doing here is leveraging the digitization strategy they deployed from about 18 months ago. And frankly, if you are intelligent about analyzing customer data, you probably have the ability to understand the customer far better than just receiving some collateral. So I think they are taking advantage of the knowledge that they've created, the customer information, data points that they have, and are basically going to leverage that going forward. So very interesting development. I think it's noteworthy in my opinion. You touched on the World Bank report and specifically the outlook for 2021 and 2022, where they're seeing what I would call a gentle recovery. Those numbers that everyone's quoting is based on an optimal outcome around the COVID situation, which so far has been very good, and also an economic recovery in the world at large. I looked at those numbers and noticed the media picked up everything. I kind of think that was the most optimistic possible scenario in my baseline thinking. Rubis Energy bought out Kenol Kobil here in Kenya. Kenol Kobil is was a big petrol station company, long-standing. Rubis is the French company, big in Francophone Africa, a big foray into Anglophone Africa, and in line with what I think is Emmanuel Macron's strategy of encouraging French expansion into the Anglosphere in Africa. Recently, President Kenyatta was his guest in Paris to sign a large borrowing transaction related to a road construction, a toll road construction program right through the heartland of Kenya. So interesting. Rubis, I think, has to be seen in the context of that French expansion into English-speaking Africa. So I'm sure they're going to be knocking on your door in Nigeria in short order. South Sudan, $500 million oil refinery. Those are bold people, aren't they? South Sudan recognized as one of the riskier jurisdictions in Africa, and a $500 million investment, whilst probably from an economic point of view makes a lot of sense in the sense you can distribute into the region. But from a risk management point of view, quite an interesting development, probably the biggest FDI in South Sudan's history. And then just finally, just switch off with Tanzanian inflation, 3.1% year on year. Tanzania, of course, is a strong agri-economy. The big issue has been food inflation, which spiked last month globally. And I think they're able to tame the inflation outlook essentially because food production has never been a challenge in Tanzania.
I agree. But Ali Sega, would you want to weigh in on the World Bank Sub-Saharan Africa's latest report? What's your view?
It was a really good report, and I think it shows a lot of, we can say, weaknesses and way forward for sub-Saharan country, in fact. So I think it's really, really important to go through it and to see each one of the detail and to have perhaps an action plan for this detail and to go ahead, in fact. But it was really a good report, and I think it needs to be read, in fact.
I agree with you. We'll speak to a few North African stories a little bit later. Let's talk about the West African market in Nigeria. Of course, the budget presented $34 billion in US dollars, 13 trillion naira Nigerian currency 2021 budget, took the headlines yesterday and is all over the media overnight and early today. Transcorp Hotel is the largest hotel in Nigeria, and it's also the largest listed on the exchange. The stock exchange says it's agreeing with the free float compliance reports that this hotelier published to keep things in place for at least for the next 3 years. The Bank of Ghana has continued to intervene in the currencies market, $1.25 billion so far since the year started. The central bank has been able to put $525 million, about 75% of the total bids on the table since the 2020 started. The Treasury in Ivory Coast is raising 33 billion CFA francs via auctions, and Cameroon's oil revenue down 28% to 197 CFA franc in the month of June. Josh, the budget is the big story. What's your take at Vetiva Capital briefly on this next year's budget for Nigeria?
Well, I think the biggest figure from that budget is, I think, the over 5 trillion deficit that is contained within that 13.8 trillion total budget. So overall, I think what we need to realize is that such a large deficit, obviously year on year since 2016, we've seen the deficits grow significantly. So I think what we're going to expect is that the government is going to have to go about borrowing significant funds, either from the local markets, but we're probably going to see most of that borrowing done on the international stage. At the moment, local borrowing is quite cheap, although the federal government knows that it's not sustainable to keep rates artificially low, especially if they're going to try and borrow such significant funds. But on the international markets, because of the way the economy has been, they will probably get some slightly favorable rates. It will be as high probably as some of the previous Eurobonds that we've seen. However, some investors might be a bit reluctant to start so soon coming back into the market to borrow Nigeria billions of dollars. But overall, definitely there's going to be a lot of international borrowing. They might still go with the same tactic of looking for concessionary loans, but those loans will obviously come with a lot of conditions that I'm not sure we'll be willing to meet, because if we're to meet those conditions, we might have to see further devaluations of our currency in 2021. So the government might just sit back and say we'll run maybe 2 or 3 rounds of Eurobond issuance and fund a majority or a significant part of the budget from there. But overall, obviously, we know that this government they want to spend their way out of a bad economy. The only issue is when you're doing that through capital expenditure and not really through meaningful stimulus programs. Those capital expenditures are going to be very long-term projects that may not reap rewards or reap benefits in the near term, because they might not even be completed in the near term. So for the next 5 to 10 years, until those projects are finished, revenue, value, add value to the economy, whether it's through completing all the proposed rail transportation systems that will allow for the transportation of raw materials from the north or the east down to the ports to be exported, or whether it's setting up the electricity infrastructure in order to allow for large-scale manufacturing to take those raw materials and produce finished products, which will then be exported. All these projects are not going to be completed in 2 or 3 years. They're going to take it's at least 5 to 10 years for them to be up to speed to start generating value for the economy.
Okay, thank you for raising the curtain. I'm sure whenever we have the country's budget, conversations always take days and weeks. Everybody's trying to wrap their heads around it, so it's never a one-off thing. But thanks for raising the curtain on the conversation, joining your voices into trying to drill down into the numbers, as it were. Let's look at the Southern African market. Part of the World Bank report, latest on Africa, spoke to the Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP will recover, as Ali mentioned earlier. But again, for East and Southern Africa, the economy may expand faster at about 2.7%. That's according to that latest Africa's Pulse report. Yesterday, the FAO, that's the Food and Agriculture Organization, said the World Food Price Index increased 5% in the month of September. But folks in South Africa seems to be back with their appetite for the restaurants. So turnover, Spur Corporation says restaurants turnover up 73.8% last month, and the share price of that company moved up that. Botswana Central Bank cut interest rate 50 basis points on Thursday to 3.75%. A quick one, Ali Khan, in terms of the appetite for restaurants now in South Africa. This looks good.
So I think that's a very positive number. I mean, as we've discussed before, this is all about behavioral economics. South Africa had the hardest lockdown of all on this continent, and I think the opening up released people, and that's confirmation that people took that opportunity to get out. And obviously, Spur has a good offering and took significant advantage of that. So that's pretty impressive, up 73.8% by any stretch of the imagination. It'll be good to see whether those follow through, but I thought that's a very positive step. We were referencing, sticking with food, this food price index increase, 5%, is a big increase in a single month. I haven't drilled into that report to see exactly what's happened, but by my experience, that is a substantial move, and we'll have to keep an eye on that going forward, because that could pose a lot of risks for those countries which are big importers of food. Fortunately for South Africa in particular, they've got a very strong agri economy there. In fact, the agricultural sector was the only sector that's grown this year out of all the sectors of that economy. Botswana cutting interest rates by 50 basis points. Of course, you will remember that there was a sticker shock with their second quarter GDP numbers. It was quite a shocker.
Yes, about 24%.
They're trying to stimulate the economy, and I think that's the right move, given that inflation there is so tame at the moment.
Ali Sega, in terms of the world food price, what are you noticing in terms of food prices across inflation numbers?
In terms of inflation in North Africa, mostly we have a big inflation, because most of the commodities are imported. So due to the situation now, prices are going really, really high, in fact, in terms of inflation, especially for a raw commodity like wheat, like all these kind of commodities that all North African imports.
If you're talking about North Africa, so let's just quickly look through the North African top stories to see some of these stories around economies and the markets. Morocco's Crédit Agricole, that's the bank, says its net income was up nearly 10% in the first half of the year. The EGX, that's the Egyptian stock market, is set to list the shares of El Badr Plastic after the company's par value was dropped from 1 Egyptian pound to 0.5. And Egyptian City Edge says it will become a holdco within the next 3 years. Casablanca Stock Exchange says it has completed the annual review of the composition of its ESG 10. And Algeria's Sonatrach and Naturgy signed amendments for gas sale. But I'm sticking with Ali Sega. What more do you see within the North African space?
Yes, so it's very, we can say, contradicting. You have some companies that are doing really well, you know, like Crédit Agricole in Morocco. So Crédit Agricole is one of the main banks in Morocco, and they are doing really well, to be honest with you. But some other banks are not doing well in Morocco, in the same country. So it's really, really mitigated. For example, in Egypt, the situation is not good. So to see El Badr to be listed at half price, it's not a really good news, in fact. So they wanted to be listed at $1, and now this is 0.5. Why? Because this company has done a big loss in the first semester 2020. So this is one of the things. After, the last thing is on Sonatrach. In fact, Sonatrach, as you know, Sonatrach is one of the biggest African companies. So they are mostly dealing with gas and oil exports. So Algeria is a big exporter of gas and oil to Spain and to Italy mostly. So what happened, this is due to the situation, the oil price has decreased, and the oil price has an impact on the gas price. So what has done Spain, this is to rediscuss the previous agreement they had with Algeria to rediscuss the pricing. Algeria has said yes, they want to rediscuss the pricing, but they want to rediscuss also the volume because they want to have a bigger market share in Spain, and also the duration of the agreement. So the agreement normally will be, we can say, extend a little bit more, the price will decrease, and the volume will increase also. So it's not a good news in terms of short term, we can say, impact, but on the long term, I think for Sonatrach is a good thing because they will earn more market shares and they will have a bigger, we can say, stability in the long term with Spain. I know that for Italy, there is also some ongoing discussion to increase the volume, but also to decrease the price. So as I told you, in North Africa, it's really, really mitigated the situation today.
Interesting. I want to see what Joshua Debisi has to say with the Nigerian market so far this week. What's your outlook for today?
Well, okay, so I think this has been a more mixed week than the previous weeks. Obviously, a lot of gains, have been. A lot of people have taken profit on the gains that we previously saw. I wouldn't go as far as to call it, like a complete change in sentiment. Rather, I think it's just some opportunists, taking advantage of significant capital appreciation to, book some profits, which has then been reinvested into the market. Because I think in terms of value traded, we've seen pretty much the same. I think for 2 days straight, we saw about 9.5 billion total value traded. So this just shows you, even though the markets were negative, then it was all about people booking profits and then buying in at lower prices in order to, take advantage of this sort of wave that is currently ongoing, because sentiment has still been positive. Obviously, there's still some positive expectations surrounding all the banks that are yet to release their third quarter results, and some other companies as well. So I think generally there's a lot of optimism that the economy in general is going to be, in a strong position, which is why we've seen, such strong gains. The market is now in the green by almost 7%, from being in the red for the majority to see a little bit more positive. But I think it will be mixed, because every time we'll see maybe 2 or 3 positive sessions, we might see some profit taking on that, and then we, revert back to the positives again. So I think today we might just see a few more sell-offs, but by next week, I think we might start to see another pickup.
Airtel Africa yesterday says its financials will be released on October the 23rd. There's going to be a management conference call. Airtel Africa operates in 14 African countries. So are you optimistic on these telcos' numbers? Joshua?
Well, generally the telcos have been, doing quite well. I think from the performance we saw from MTN, even Airtel to some extent in H1, obviously due to the fact that their business model doesn't really rely on, one state of being or the other. As long as people are using mobile networks, they are making money. And I think there's even been a bit of an expansion. Now, across, all of Africa is a little bit of a different story. But at least for Nigeria, which is one of their biggest markets, I can be quite sure that we will see, some pretty solid revenue from that market, at least. West Africa in general, the rest of Africa, I can't really speak directly to, but I'm sure that their performances will not be negative. There will not be, significant losses in any of those markets.
Ali Khan, in Nairobi, in terms of North Africa, Ali Saga spoke earlier about the food inflation along this corridor. I know Egypt is one of a major wheat importer, by the way. They're trying to set up a commodity exchange to try and help. Do you think food inflation is something to watch in that corridor?
Absolutely. I think that's the single most challenging situation. And the worst case is when you get a spike in food inflation. If you've studied history, that's when you tend to get massive unrest and massive problems. So I think it is a sort of major macroeconomic and societal challenge. But, the Egyptians have managed it extremely well. They have a supply channel from Russia, from Ukraine. They manage it well. They're ahead of the curve. They know the challenge. And, I feel confident that the state there is grown up and efficient and understands how to manage the situation. But of course, this is the biggest challenge facing that North African corridor.
Ali Saga, what other risks are you seeing within the North African and the Maghreb region?
Yes, the other risks are, we can say, well known. It's mostly macroeconomic risk. For example, for Tunisia and Morocco, this is the lack of tourism due to the COVID-19. So Morocco and Tunisia and Egypt also didn't really have or not yet have a tourist season this 2020. So it impacts a lot the budget of the country. After, for Algeria, Algeria and Libya are mostly the oil price, in fact. Since the oil price is low, this country will suffer a lot, in fact. So I think this is the main risk. After, the risk also is for Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, and Egypt is on remittances. Today, remittances is declining on we can say, really hardly on this situation. For example, for Morocco, we have a big decrease on remittances from a Moroccan living in Europe. So it impacts also a lot the country of this region.
Ali Khan, would you say congratulations to Algeria? The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development held its annual general meeting this week and admitted Algeria. This is good news, isn't it? This is a handshake across the Mediterranean.
Absolutely. I think the EBRD has been at the front of trying to expand its remit into North Africa. It's looking at the Mediterranean economy, which includes North Africa and Southern Europe. And I think it's found a new mission. Historically, it was the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and was focused on Eastern Europe. And now you're seeing that it's also now turning its gaze to focus on the southern border for Europe. A very positive. And I think Algeria is an interesting story. I saw that O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, was there as well recently. And Algeria seems to be making some subtle geoeconomic and geopolitical moves from the way I read it at the moment. And I think this was a good positive development.
Okay, thank you so much, Ali Kansachu in Nairobi. Let's leave it there for today, Friday, the 9th of October. Thank you, my panelists, Ali Kansachu from Nairobi, Ali Seger, who is a risk and governance compliance analyst from Dubai. Thank you so much. And Joshua Adebisi in Lagos, Nigeria, the banking analyst at Vertiva Capital Management. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great weekend and see you next week. We appreciate your time today.